Hello, tonight I'm going to be attempting something which I've been meaning to do for a while, but which has kind of become more of a necessity recently, and that's to apply a belt kit to my trusty HEQ5. The last 6 months or so I've been having trouble with guiding, and despite a tune-up and a lot of fiddling around in PhD, it hasn't got any better, and it's the type of problem that's it's a short period problem, which means that it's I'm getting, if you understand PhD graphs, in the right ascension axis I'm getting very fast oscillation all the time, basically, and 14 seconds, about 14 seconds period of oscillation, which is apparently very difficult to get rid of. Don't know exactly why it's caused, but it's related, I believe, to the period of each tooth on the right ascension motor gear. So I won't go into that here. I'll explain it a little more in the article, which you can read. That'll go alongside this, but. Yeah, I'm going to attempt this upgrade, and I thought I'd record it. I haven't done this before. It's a bit scary, so let's get on with it. Well, the first thing here is to remove the panel which covers the gears. There's 6 screws. Don't lose them, obviously. I'm not going to say that all the way through. Mine's looking a little worse for wear, because it's done good service and it's got to the point where it's starting to look a little tired. But it still works great, apart from this little issue. There we go. Right. And there we have it. Now, there's a few things to bear in mind with this mod. Firstly, the age of your HEQ5 does actually have a bearing on the method you use. There's a slight modification to the way you have to do it with the earlier HEQ5s. The earlier ones have these hexagonal topped things holding the idle gears in. So you've got the 2 idle gears, you've got the one for the declination axis, and you've got the one for the right ascension axis. Or is it the other way around? No, it's not. This is the one. This is the one for the right ascension axis. This is the one for declination. So there's a certain amount of tolerance that any mechanical system is built to, and because of the fact that these are mass-produced systems, they're in the end, they are, for what they are, relatively cheap. The tolerance in them isn't wonderful, which means it varies greatly depending on the particular HEQ5 you have. You may have a good one, you may have a not so good one. This up till now has been pretty good, but despite a recent tune-up where the gears were, the meshing of the gears was tuned up somewhat, I still get this problem with guiding. So I'm just going to do a quick demo for old time's sake now, before I make the change, so we can hear what it sounds like and what it looks like before I've actually I've done the work. Right, here we go. Got the handset plugged in. We're not tracking at the moment. You'll notice there's no movement whatsoever. I'm actually going to set it to sidereal rate. And you'll see that when I set it to sidereal rate, the gears actually start moving very slowly on the right ascension axis. There we go. Let's focus that a bit better. You should be able to see them moving. It's slow. It is very slow, but that's the rate at which that stepper motor turns in order to move that right ascension axis at the rate it needs to track the motion of the Earth. So it's nice and slow. So there we go. Obviously, we generally slew a little quicker than that. Otherwise we'll be waiting all night. So if I set it to the fastest slew rate, which is 9, and I now slew, there we go. There we go. Slewing in RA. As you can hear, it's not terrible. Certainly once it gets up to speed, it's actually reasonably quiet. But you get that nasty grind when it stops and starts. I mean, to be honest, it's not a big issue as long as it's tracking well and actually working well in general. Then really you don't have to worry about it. You know, a little bit of noise is to be expected. There's the declination axis. Reverse. There we go. So all very exciting. Not particularly, but there you go. You've got an idea of the sort of amount of noise before we start. So what we're going to be doing in this mod is actually taking this center gear out totally. Well, we're actually going to be taking them all out totally on both axes, but the idea is to end up with a belt pulley here and a small belt pulley here, and the center or idle gear will be removed from the equation totally. Now that removes two sources of backlash. Firstly, the motor to idle gear. If that's not tight, then you get backlash, and if it's too tight, it binds and doesn't work properly. The other gear here is the actual RA worm gear, and there's another source of backlash where the idler hits that. So taking that out makes this a direct drive mount, which means that this little gear here, which is the one connected to the motor, will be directly driving via a belt the gear here, which will mean you basically get rid of the backlash on the axis. Now backlash, if you don't know, is basically the... Let me switch this off because it is still tracking. Switch it off so it's still. Backlash is the little bit of movement you get. Whoop, it's hard to show on here, but you always get, you know, unless you get perfectly meshing gears, which you won't at a mount of this cost, you always get that little bit of movement. Now what that means is that when you're reversing direction, and you might notice this on a mount you've got, that when you reverse direction, it takes maybe a split second, maybe up to a second or so, to actually engage in the other direction. And that's because the gear teeth have to separate and re-engage because they're not perfectly meshed. And that's a source of tracking error, especially on the declination axis. It's not so much on the RA axis, because all the RA axis should be doing is slowing down and speeding up. It should never reverse direction. But it's still a source of error when you come to guiding. So we're going to replace them. So yeah, anyway, here we go. It's going to be a bit interesting because, like I said, I've never done this before, but wish me luck. Here we have the bits and bobs you get with the kit. This is the belt kit for the right ascension axis, and we've got one for the deck axis. Only difference really between those two is that the little pulley that goes where the idle gear is smaller on the deck axis. And we've got a pack of spacers, which are there basically if they have a certain variation in the way these mounts are cast. So sometimes you need to use spacers to make the to avoid the gears actually rubbing, or the pulleys rubbing on the inside of the cover. So, and that's some tools and some screws and bits and bobs, and a spacer for the cover, which goes over the top once it's done, and allows the cover to sit basically proud of the original location, so it doesn't rub on the top of the gears. In theory, we shall see. To get started, we have to remove the outside panel here. There's 4 screws to remove, so you take those out. That's number 3. little longer than expected. And number 4. You have it. And that should allow the top cover here to pop off, which it does. Honest. There we go. Okay, set that aside. And inside we have all the connectors for the various motors. Now I'm going to have to trace these now, so I'm going to switch off for a sec, but I'll figure out where they are, unplug them, and then be ready to go. Right, then that's the RA axis connector, motor connector disconnected. What you've got to do is when you're doing this, note the path that it's taking through the mount, because you want to stick it back the same, because what you don't want is for it to get this whole shaft here rotates when you're slewing, and what you don't want is for this to get caught in that in any way, shape or form, so it gets torn up, because obviously that wouldn't be good. So now it's time to take out the RA motor. Well, the 3 screws that hold the RA motor actually into the case are this one, and this one. You need to obviously remove them all, so I'll do that now, and we'll extract the motor. Here we are, now removing the last of those 3. There we go. And as you'll see now, the motor's completely loose and literally pops when you've disentangled it from behind. Where are we? There we go. Pops out completely. There we go. So as you see, the idle motor is still attached. It goes down. The post goes down here, and it's held in with a little grub screw. We're going to be taking that out in a minute. So yeah, that's the RA motor. Well, what you'll notice on my HEQ5, which is different to the ones that the majority of everybody else will have, is it's an older one. Like I said, it's got this hexagonal thingy. That's a technical term. This hexagonal bolt holding the idle motor, the idle gear on. So with this, there's only 1 grub screw as opposed to 2 on the normal HEQ5, or sorry, on the later HEQ5 motors. So with this, we actually have to remove this. It's actually got a thread on it, so I will do that. I've already loosened the grub screw here, so we should find that when I loosen that, fingers crossed, the whole lot will pop off. Right then, that is now loosened, and in theory, this should come out. There we go. As you'll see, that at the base is threaded. Now, on the newer HEQ5s, there are 2 grub screws, and the whole thing is just a 5mm post, like the top part of this. Now, what that means is that the replacement post will only go down, if without modification, will only go down into the motor housing this far, because obviously it'll hit the narrower part down there and won't go any further. Now, what that means is that we have to, there we go, there's the idle gear. What it means is we have to drill out this with a 5mm bit, so that then it's all the way down to the bottom. It's 5mm. So hopefully that won't be too much of an issue. I'm going to be doing that in a minute, and it's going to be the scariest part of the entire thing, but fingers crossed it will go okay. I have to remove this motor gear, which is also going to be quite interesting because I don't have the extractor tool, but I have been told it should be relatively easy, and I suppose I'll soon find out. Right, what I'm finding is, not surprisingly, that motor spur is quite hard to get off. Now, what I don't want to do is to bend that shaft, because that would be very bad news. So I'm going to work on this slowly. Possibly I'm going to need an extractor tool, so see what I've got and go from there, because at the moment that is quite tightly that's quite tightly secured to the shaft, which is good, I suppose, but does mean it's a little more difficult to get off. Here we go. There's the there it is, off. As you might have noticed, the surroundings are a little different to before, because I'm not in the same place. I've had to come and borrow the use of a what would it be? A pinion extractor?
Yeah.
What would you call it?
Yeah, pinion puller, mini
Pulley
puller.
puller. There you go. So there we are. Well, here we are back in the normal place. And there are the offending gears, now removed from the posts. Yes, little word of advice. Get the tool, it's worth it. I've just had a 30-odd mile round trip to get to someone who had a tool that I could use to do the job. So yeah, it's probably worth it. About £9. You know, there we go. The next step on my particular mount, because I've got an older one, just down inside there you can see there's a thread. There's actually a thread in the hole itself, down at the bottom. On the new ones they haven't got that, which is great, but for mine it means that I have to drill that hole out. This pin here, which is the one with the idle, it's not a pulley, I'm not sure what it is, the idle wheel on it, is this post needs to fit down far enough. You can either shorten that post, which with the tools I've got would be very difficult, or you can use a drill, 5mm drill bit, metal drill bit, something like a cobalt drill bit or something, to drill out the thread in there, which is what I'm going to do. So here we go. Right, apologies for the big gap. I had a little bit of bother. I drilled out the holes, and unfortunately my slightly inaccurate hand drill did widen the hole slightly. Bad workman blames his tools, I know, but there we go. No, I think it's basically it was a very sharp, and the aluminium is actually quite easy to shave, and I ended up making the hole slightly bigger. So I've had to use some epoxy to keep the pin in place. No big deal, but something you'll have to think about, because there's no top grub screw. If I show you the other axis, hear me out. Because there is no top grub screw on these old HEQ5s, we have a bottom grub screw, and we have the hole, but the pin doesn't go all the way down into that, so you end up basically with a loose pin. And unfortunately, the only way to really hold it is either to drill yourself another grub screw hole and tap it, and etc, etc, which unfortunately I don't have the kit to do, or you can use a bit of epoxy and effectively adhere it in place, which is what I've done. I've also, as you'll see, replaced the worm gear there, and basically put everything back together and put the belt on. While you're doing it, according to the instructions, the spindle there, sorry, not the spindle, is it the spindle? No, the spindle's the bit that goes through the middle, the shaft, and the wheel on top. It has to be in line with the centre of that has to be in line with the centre of the motor gear. You'll see what I mean on the instructions, but not too hard. Just got to make sure, if you're using one of these old HEQ5s, you glue it in place, and epoxy it in place, and hold it until it's cured. So really, you need a good 5-minute epoxy or something similar. But once that's done, you put your belt on, and you have a belt drive. There we go. What you will notice is the belt does ride up and down very slightly on the worm gear. If we wind it back, you'll see, there we go. It rides up very slightly. You'll see there's a slight gap at the bottom, but it's no big deal. I've spoken to Dave at Rowan, and he said it's not an issue, as long as it's not going too far. The little collar on the spindle below the plastic wheel holds the plastic wheel within a certain range on that spindle, and that will stop the belt riding too far. Okay, there we go. So now we have the deck axis to do. Wish me luck. Okay, now you need to fit this gear and leave approximately 1 to 2 millimeter gap underneath, which should give you more or less the right amount of clearance for what's required. You can alter that slightly, and you may do after you actually reinstall the motor and you run the drive. You'll notice it'll settle the belt onto the wheel, onto the gear, and you'll see it ride up or down. And you know, you use your judgment then to loosen off the grub screws and raise or lower this slightly. Right, now time to tighten that up and to proceed to the motor bit. Alright, here we have the right ascension, sorry, the declination motor with the new belt drive gear attached to it. It slides down just on top of the empty shaft there, and you nip the two grub screws to secure it in place. The operative word here is nip. Don't over tighten them. These things are very small and made of not the hardest stuff in the world. You will strip them if you do them too hard, plus you'll leave a nice nasty burr on the motor shaft, so it's better to just nip them in place. They fit quite tightly anyway. It's just to secure them in place. So there we go. That's ready to install. Okay, in my case, because again I've got, well, whether it's because I've got an older HEQ5 or not, I'm not sure. But these are the spacer washers that Rowan sent me, that Dave from Rowan sent me, to put a slight gap between the motor plate and the motor itself, which drops the spindle down slightly. I've tried installing this without putting these in, and the motors rub on the cover. So hopefully this will do the job. If not, I may have to resort to a little more spacing at the top. But anyway, I'll put those in. They go on top. Here we go. They go on top of the motor and underneath the motor plate. I'll show you once it's done. Okay, we're now at a point where we have the motor plate fitted back to the motor, and as you can see, just about in between the motor plate and the motor itself are the washers to give a little more clearance. They are actually there's 3 screws, so they're there and there. The other one is actually where the post for the idler goes. So I'm gonna do that shortly. What I did on the last axis was install it into the mount first, and then epoxy the idler post in place, because the mount holds it nice and steady for you to be able to do that. Anyway, so to the mount we go. There we go. That's the motor actually just laid into the mount. There's no screws holding it in yet. Obviously, the motor itself, it's oriented so that the idler is in between the worm gear and the motor gear. So now I'm going to secure it in place with the 3 screws, not tighten them too much, but just secure it in place enough so I can put that idler pin in and get it aligned. Okay, I've just mixed up some rapid set epoxy. Don't need very much, just a little squirt of resin and hardener, because you're only going to be applying it into the hole to stick the shaft in there. So yeah, I'll apply it now and I'll get on with it, because this is going to start curing pretty quick. That's now in place and curing. I'm going to give it a good 5 to 10 minutes. It's a good way of working out how long it's going to take to actually look at your mixed up epoxy still on your mixing thing. At the moment that's incredibly loose. Give it a few minutes and you'll see this will actually harden, and that will be hardening at approximately the same rate as you're getting actually on the mount itself. So that should give you a good idea when that's hard enough and ready to stick the belt on. I'll fast forward and we'll see how it goes in a minute. again, with this axis, we've got the same thing. We've lined up. It's very, apologies about this. It's quite difficult to see here, but the centre of the spindle. Let's see if I can find a better angle. The centre of the spindle. That's the best I can do. I apologise, but centre of the spindle is in line with the centre of the gear here when that wheel is pushed against the top retaining screw. Okay, sorry, it's a bit difficult to see, but it is in line. So yeah, that's ready to go. Just got to wait for it to cure, and then we'll put the belt on. Here we are a few minutes later, and this stuff is extremely hard. It's not quite solid yet, but it's very tough, and it's certainly going to be holding the gear in. It's tight enough for us to put the belt on. So here we go. Here we have the belt itself. Doesn't look like much, but it's an extremely strong thing. I mean, when you think of what the torque this has got to take to drive this round, it's must have a fair bit of strength to it. So it goes around the. Oh, by the way, leave the 3 screws loosened off for now. The motor is currently loose in the housing. You put it around the motor gear, around the little spindle, and around the worm gear. Sorry about that. There we go. So that's basically in place now. The next step is to move the motor gear. Move the motor plate and motor back in the mount housing so that it tensions the belt. Now, what you should find is that when it's fully forwards, it's really loose. There we go. It only takes a couple of millimeters of movement, there we go, to tension it, and you should still be able to apply a small amount of pressure and get a slight deflection, but you don't want to over tension it. I'm guessing it just doesn't work as well, because that's one of the things that they say in the instructions. Don't over tension the belt. So I'm going to do it now. I'm going to screw the bolts back down to secure it in place, and then we'll do a test. The belt is now tensioned and ready to go, and this is the moment of truth. Set the slew rate to 9, and slew away. Fingers crossed. And there she goes. Okay, let's just quickly check. I haven't done this yet. Check that there's not much in the way of riding up and down on there. So no, not in that direction. Let's check it in the other direction. Okay, we're looking very good. I think that's done. The next and hopefully final step is to apply this spacer over the top of the gears, and to put the normal cover on over the top of it with the screws supplied by Rowan. So I'm going to try that now, and what I'm hoping is there will be sufficient clearance above this to allow those gears to spin without rubbing the inside of the cover. If there isn't, then I'm going to have to take a look at it and figure out how I'm going to space it a bit more, but whatever happens, it's not going to be a big deal, so I'll sort that out if I encounter it. Oh, here we go then. We've got the belt mod completed. As you'll notice, the spacer is now fitted on the side. It makes a slight difference to how the mount looks. You get this sort of bit of a bulge at the side, but it's, it's no issue. It's all very neat with the spacer that Rowan sends you. So the whole thing is now complete. So I can now demonstrate it with the belt mod fitted. There we go. So if I set the rate to 9, there we go, and slew. There we go. Alright. Back. in deck. All in all, I'm very happy with it, and hopefully it will sort the issues I've been having. First light will come when we get the first decent night. As we all know, we're now doomed to a good 3 weeks of cloud because I've done this. So, we'll see. But I'll report back as soon as I know whether it's improved the situation or not. Thank you very much for watching. Hope it hasn't been too boring. Wanted to show how all this fits together, and fingers crossed I've helped a few people and it'll be useful. Thank you very much. Cheers.